Hello, and welcome back to the Survivor's Mic podcast. I'm your host, Posh, and I'm excited that we are on episode 14, but on episode 2 of the new series that we recently introduced, Beyond Survival. And so I have something quite interesting that I want to talk about today. And above it all, I'm so glad, and I'll give you a brief background of how and why we came about to this new series. And it's really just out of the fact that if we do not seek to find out how life could possibly be on the other side of survival and work on our mindsets and prepare ourselves for the so called healing, right? Which is, to me, not a destination, but a process that you go through as you go through life. But the Beyond Survival series is really trying to seek ways on how to, without degrading the fact that you are a survivor, but you're trying to find out and to figure out how do you move past that position into the aftermath or afterlife of surviving through trauma or losing your loved ones or being abused, and the list goes on and on. So if you are one of those people who do follow the podcast on Substack, the podcast newsletter, there is an article that we released yesterday, and it talks about quite interesting things that I thought, okay, I think for this week let's have both of these to match up. And so this episode is gonna talk about the lies that your survival mindset told you, right? And oh, let's not be offended. Let's get through it. And so I think one of the biggest lies that we have all, and let's take out other people from this conversation or from this equation for a moment, and the lies that we've always told ourselves, right? And I think the one that I put on the top of that list is you are too much. And I think, sometimes these mentalities or these thoughts that come into our mind, sometimes they can be birthed by other people speaking to us, but sometimes they really just recur out of the conversations that we have with self. And I think this is going to be a whole episode on its own about conversations with self, right? I think so. Sometimes we think, oh, maybe I'm too sensitive, or maybe I'm too intense, I'm demanding, especially in, within relationships, especially if they are romantic ones, it becomes very complicated very quickly. And we do tend to tell ourselves or to lie to ourselves that we are all these things, right? And so somehow we adapt to this. We get used to this language, and we start to think that we really are too much, right? Too sensitive. We are too emotional. I think that's one thing that for us as women, it gets us to be very frustrated very quickly when people say, "Oh, you are too emotional," or "You're not, emotionally intelligent enough." And this is just sometimes coming out of the person that you are and how you get to judge yourself, right? And yet, the truth of that matter is sometimes if these thoughts are birthed by other people, then you are most likely in the wrong rooms. We are in the wrong, we're having wrong associations, right? Where people get to tell us this. And I think in romantic relationships, it happens a lot, right? When people feel like they can't carry you on their shoulders, or because they are dealing with their own lives, they tend to put in these sentiments or these lies into your face. So keeping the wrong crowd, keeping, staying in the wrong room, sitting on the wrong table could actually get you to a place of being lied to this way. But also, when we turn that coin and we look at ourselves in the mirror, we could actually be having what I call unhealthy conversations with self. And we will talk about this later. But for now, on this particular lie, I want to focus on the rooms, the associations, and, the toxic conversations with self that could lead to us believing and to shrink ourselves and to listen to these lies, which is something that needs to be worked on if you're still in this place. And by me saying this, it doesn't mean I've arrived, I'm still on my process. But one of the most liberating things is to do an audit of your life and who you associate with, especially if they're those people who really, once you are in there around them or in their space, they drain your energy. They tell you things that are not true about yourself and they frustrate you. That would be very important for you to do. And then the second lie, you have to earn your place. I think this is one of the toughest things that you could go through as a survivor. Now, you have been fighting your own battles in your own shadows when nobody saw, right? And you're on your own. And now you're out of that space and you're still being told for you have to become normal. You have to you have to prove if it's in your relationships, you have to prove to these partners or to these acquaintances, I would call them, that you are worthy being listened to, that you deserve the love, right, from that partner that you have, that you have to be useful, to be impressive, you have to be agreeable, or you have to be exceptional. I think, especially in these times that we live, if you're someone who is like an intellectual junkie, or if you're unfortunately like me and you're like a mathematics junkie, there's always this chase of wanting to be exceptional and wanting to come up with the greatest idea that could change the world. And if you are, you have to impress, you have to excel, right? You have to do more than any other basic person is doing, or put on so much effort than anybody else. But there's something interesting about trying to keep up with this. It's not sustainable. Because as long as we are human beings, we have our limits. And even beyond our limits, we have our specific purposes and callings and the reason why we exist at all. And so sometimes I think because we find ourselves, unfortunately or fortunately, as survivors of whatever that can be, we put so much pressure on ourselves that we have to earn our place as normal people, quote unquote, I would call it, that exist within this world. And the truth is, your place in this world is not something that you earn. It was given to you the moment you arrived in this world. You are in the right place at the right time, and everything that happened to you, whether it makes sense now or it doesn't, it had its own purpose in your life, and it has the potential to empower and to raise up other people who are around you, especially if you choose to share your story and you choose to empower others with your story. So this was a very interesting point. The more I ponder on it, the more I'm really just impressed by how powerful some of the things that we believe can have impact on us, positive or negative, right? So the third lie I want to talk about is that trusting people is a dangerous thing to do. And I think without having to judge, this almost feels like a natural thing to do. It's not like we wake up one day, especially for those of you who are like, victims of child abuse, like myself. You don't just wake up and you walk into, this very amazing guy or lady, and you like them, and everything about them, impresses you. You don't just wake up and be like, oh, now today I'm going to just choose to be difficult. I'm going to choose to just ruin this relationship that I have with this amazing person. No, it doesn't happen like that. It's these subconscious conversations and lies that we are telling ourselves. So the idea of trusting people, it almost feels impossible because you can't trust people and you convince yourself. And this is like in German we call it Selbstschutzmechanismus. So direct translation would be personal protection mechanism, right? And I think there's an English word for that. I really apologize. I feel like the longer I'm living in Germany, the more I'm forgetting my English. But you are in your world. This is safe. In your world, you have to do this, right? So you push back, you hold yourself back, you even starve yourself from the beautiful things that you could be enjoying, whether it's relationships or it's just opportunities. It's tough to trust people, and you have convinced yourself that this is exactly what you should do to make sure that you're safe, right? So when the people that were supposed to be our safe place were the ones who hurt you the most, then the mind draws a logical conclusion that people cannot be trusted. You can't do it. And you can't have anybody come close to you because once they are close, trouble is going to start. Once they come as close as possible, you know that they are going to hurt you. And this is really nothing to do with their character. You barely would study their character or their record or whatsoever. It's already a stamp on your brain that this is what people all together. And look how unfair this is, right? Guys, forgive my English. I'm gonna I'm gonna need to go back to English lessons. I'm struggling. It's crazy. Anyway, back to what I was talking about. Check how unfortunate this is. Check how we could starve ourselves from meeting amazing people, from having healthy relationships, from opportunities, just because we choose to stamp every human being that exists on earth as not trustworthy, right? But the truth is this: some people are not safe. That's a fact. That is real. And your discernment matters. But not everyone carries the same intentions as the one who wounded you. Did you get that? But not everyone carries the same intentions as the ones who wounded you. This is deep. This is really deep. And so, while we are on that point, it gets us to the fourth, I hope it's the fourth lie that we tell ourselves as survivors. Healing means forgetting. The idea, to start with, let's correct something. I think there's a myth around healing, right? And even if you want to look at it, on a medical standpoint, or you want to look at it on an emotional standpoint, it's not a destination that you arrive, right? If your doctor puts you on your antibiotics, this is like weeks that you're going to be taking that. And then the process of that healing begins to happen. And it's not an arrival thing, because you would notice that even years after, you would still tell people, oh my goodness, I once had such and such issue, and I was on antibiotics and stuff like that. It's not something that just goes out of your brain miraculously. I spent the last 2 weeks battling with some form of inflammation, and I was struggling with headaches, right? I think, to start with, for 3 decades of my life, I'd never been in a hospital my whole life. right? And even after coming out of that experience, I almost feel like I came out as a totally different human being because it shook me to the core. And even though I still kept up with communicating with, people who are close to me and stuff like that, the panic that was, in my subconscious, it was unbearable. And so even now I'm physically fit, but I'm constantly reminded about, oh, maybe check the way you are living, maybe increase your exercise rate, check out how you're eating and stuff like that, because it left that stamp on me already. But I'm not, most likely my whole life, not going to forget that, right? And so I think many survivors resist healing because it feels somewhere deep down like a betrayal. It feels like it takes you back to that very place that you were. And because you have again built this thing where your goal is to protect yourself, you don't want to even address it because you know it will take you back to that dark place that you don't want to go back to, right? So it feels like moving forward means what happened to you no longer matter. Like finding peace means excusing what was done. But we do forget that there's a whole difference between whosoever might have molested you, physically abused you, betrayed you, hurt you, and the person that you are. And there's even a difference between the person who was a victim in that moment and the person who have walked out of that situation. And that is the you in the now, right? There's a total difference between that and between those two individuals. And so whenever we talk about healing, whenever we talk about, again, like the name of this series, Beyond Survival, we are not supposedly claiming that once you're on that other side, it doesn't mean there's not one night that you would just be like, I can't believe I went through that. You will always remember, it will always be a stamp on your brain because it happened to you. And the goal here is not that you would you would clear up everything that you went through and rub it off like, on a writing board. That's not the goal. The goal is to find yourself even considering the fact that you went through all those things. And you could still stand and say, I do feel that I'm in a place of being healed, or I do feel like I'm in a space of working on that healing. So here's the truth: healing is not forgetting, it is not excusing, it is not pretending that the past did not happen. Nowadays people talk about something quite interesting, and it's called toxic positivity. Exactly. And I think the idea of, and I think it happens to a lot of us, I do want to suspect that it can be out of panic that we literally choose to just ignore some things and pretend like they never happened. That is not healthy either. That is not how to handle life, right? But what healing without forgetting means is simply refusing to let the past make every decision about your future. So once you are here and you feel like the relationship is great and you want to hop into it, you cannot afford to go back and tell yourself the lie. You cannot afford to go back into that little child and say it was your fault that you were molested by your uncle. It is unfair, not to anybody else, but to you, to go back and to say, because you made that mistake as a teenager, you cannot be in a space to enjoy these good things. So your healing is being able to stand here and still look back and say, I did went through all that, but I know that in this space and in this moment, I'm as resilient as I can ever be, and I deserve every other good thing that comes my way. So this takes us to our very last lie. You are not ready. This is quite an interesting lie. And I think this one can be merged with self-esteem as well. Because let us also not forget that, going through trauma or loss or betrayal, or that long list that we have, it also does something to your self-esteem, right? And so this one feels very stubborn. I think compared to the whole list that we did, this is really one of the reasons why so many, I don't even want to say so many people, I want to say so many of us have not been able to move forward because we really just felt, there's something funny that happens to me. Every time I'm on social media or I see, a high school classmate of mine got married, some of them have 3 children, and stuff like that. And I have a hard time seeing myself and my age mates as grown enough to be running families of 3 children plus a spouse. Right? And I know it sounds weird, but because there's just really there's something really tough about just believing that we are ready. And we are never ready as a people if you really look at it. I'm one of those people. I'm a school junkie and I don't study like the whole semester. And then 2 weeks before the exam, I'm like under pressure. And then the day before the exam, everybody knows in the house or on my friends, I'm not sleeping all night. Because no matter how much I study, it's only that exam that proves to me how much knowledge I had. But before I write it, I'm never ready. Right? So this is what I wrote actually in this in yesterday's newsletter edition. This one is perhaps the most stubborn of all the lies that we tell ourselves, right? The voice that says, not yet, wait until things settle. This is the most dangerous statement that you could ever tell yourself about anything, whether it's your career, it's your, calling or ministry or education, starting a family, whatever that goal might be for you. Investing, that's one thing that I feel like I wasted so many years and so much resources claiming that I need to research and I need to study about it. So that's very dangerous. Don't do that. You would say to yourself, wait until you feel stronger, wait until the circumstances are different, wait until you are more prepared, more certain, and more healed before you start doing the work of healing. This is quite interesting. This is quite interesting. And I remember when I was drafting this edition, this took me back to 2022. And in 2022, I had sought therapy for the first time in my whole life. So I had migrated at 25. I came to Germany and really it was tough. I can't speak the language, I don't know the culture. And I'm in that place where I'm really questioning myself. Did I do the right thing? What did I do? And again, I had carried everything else that I came all the way from my country with, like we spoke about in the previous point or in the previous slide, that you know, the idea of forgetting because I was carrying all this baggage. And I said, okay, I'm really gonna need to see someone here professionally. And I remember doing 5 sessions with that doctor, or with that therapist rather. And in the end, he said to me, I think that everything you have went through, you are really someone who carries so much trauma. And if you were to start deep therapy, and he was a true fan of, this deep soul therapy, psychologists call it the couch therapy. He was a huge, believer of that. And he said, if I take you this path, I fear that I might break you. You are not ready for therapy. And then he went back to say, I'm going to give you a list of books that you can just read. You are a very positive minded person. You should be okay with them. And for a few years after that, I actually believed it. And I lived my life thinking I'm positive, I can handle everything, until a huge wave of depression came in and hit me hard. And why am I saying this? I'm saying this because I still came back to that place where I realized nothing ever changed. I still feel and I still think that I need help, you know? And so, this idea of you're not yet ready, and especially when it comes to healing, where you say you don't need to be healed for you to start the process of healing, that doesn't even make sense, you know? So, how do you start the process of healing after you have been healed? Because if you have been healed already, then you don't need to do the process at all. But again, like I mentioned, it is a process. It might be a lifetime process until we leave this world. We are just still working on walking past, whatever that happened to us. I think this is a very interesting thing to really like ponder on and try to define, well, what exactly do we say, or what exactly do we claim to be readiness, right? How do I look at myself and measure myself as ready? Ready for the new opportunity, ready to move to a different, country or continent, ready to move on from whatever that I went through, right? Ready for a new career, ready to embrace new circumstances, ready to embrace change, right? How do we get to define that? And most likely, if I will be honest, it's quite tough to arrive to that place, if it happens at all. Because sometimes I feel like it never happens. You just really need to dive in, put yourself, in the deep end and just dive in. But here's the truth about this, right? You will never feel ready. And this is what I had said this really randomly, but now I'm reading to you what I have here. Readiness is not a feeling that arrives before the work. It is something that builds inside the work. Oh, this is deep. Readiness is not a feeling that arrives before the work. It is something that builds up inside the work. This is exactly what I have spoken about when you tell yourself you need to be healed for you to start the process of healing. That's not possible, right? The logic does not, confirm that. It's when you are in the healing process that you would aim to get to that place of healing. So the people who heal are not the ones who waited until they felt prepared. The people who win, the people who jump into that new career, into that relationship, move into a different continent, dive into new opportunities, explore change. They are not the people who wait to feel prepared or to feel ready. They are the ones who started anyway, even when they were imperfect, even on their hardest days. And they had no guarantee of what the outcome would be. I think if you would have a conversation with a migrant, this proves to be true. I'm one of them. I literally, every time I try to think about it, it's so crazy to me because I walked into this country with a 3-month-long visa stamped in my passport. And as of this month, I've been here for 7 years, 2 months. And that is crazy. I had no idea what I was going to do. And now I'm busy reading my emails on my graduation invites and all the things that I had to do. But if I had to wait back in my country and be like, I can't leave my people, I need to be ready financially, which is something that we always use when you're trying to make a big move in life, you know, or maybe I want to get married. I had a partner when I left my country, right? I just woke up on that day and I decided it was time for something new. And I think it proves to be true even when it comes to healing. When you look at our mindset, I spoke about the mind work, until that day that you wake up and you decide, listen, I want to change the way I think. I want to start telling myself the truth instead of the lies. And again, I think I mentioned this last week that as long as our minds have been trained for negativity, they can be untrained and they can begin to be trained for something positive because it's a muscle. And the same way that we have taken all these years, if not decades, to convince ourselves of these lies, we can take the next few decades to unturn these lies and to begin to tell ourselves the truth. And so, really, you are enough. You are not too much. You are always ready, depending on what you want to achieve. And you're not forced to forget what happened to you, neither should you neglect it. You are just the person that you are with your story that you own yourself. But what I really wish for you this weekend beyond is that you would begin to exercise to tell yourself the truth. I'm your host, Posh, and I will see you next week.